if the foundation's not strong and you don't have a good process and a good foundation, then you're going to have bad outcomes. You're not going to get what you're expecting because bad data is really just like a people process issue in disguise.
Welcome to the Process Masters podcast. I'm your host and your fellow processes, workflows, AI enthusiast, Amelia, and I'm here today with an incredible guest. I'm thrilled to introduce to you Nick Haase, co-founder of MaintainX, the leading AI-powered maintenance and asset management platform, helping industrial teams run more efficient, resilient, and safer operations. Nick spent thousands of hours on the shop floor, helping companies turn maintenance data into insight. He has also hosts the Ranch Factor and invests in more than 40 startups shaping the future of industrial tech. At FabTech, Nick shared a powerful idea that AI isn't just the first step in transformation. AI is the reward. So in this episode, 40 minutes or less, you'll learn first why digital transformation is really a sales job. Also, how pairing human and machine data builds an AI-ready culture and why doing beats debating when it comes to innovation. So Nick, thank you so much for joining us today.
Amelia, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Sure. So, I want to dive in directly to my first question here. I'm so honored to have you here and have all of your knowledge presented to us. So, I'll go in and ask you, you often say that transformation is a sales job. And I'm curious, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of folks that are brilliant that are working tirelessly behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, across manufacturing and industrial operations today. They're really smart folks. They're engineers. They've got, they kind of know what they're doing, but they don't think of themselves as classic salespeople. And generally, a lot of them are more introverted, and they have this really great idea, and they want to push it through, and they don't. And then what happens is these projects are getting stalled, and they're not working, and they're not able to get over the line, and it's usually a result of other stakeholders not doing, engaging the way that they're supposed to. And oftentimes I try to explain this to a lot of these folks that a lot of these leaders, the reason your projects are failing is because you're not selling them. You've got to go and help get the people who are the other stakeholders that need to be involved in these projects excited about it. And what excites you about this project may not be the same thing that excites them. So you have to try to understand how will this benefit them in ways that maybe aren't the reason that you initially started working on this initiative. And so for example, if it's something to do with operational throughput and reliability, maybe we're going to have less downtime, we're going to make more money. The person on the front line probably doesn't care that much about that. They want to know, how is it going to make my life easier? And if you position it, in a way that gets them excited about it and really help them understand why this is going to make their life easier, it's going to ultimately help you, help yourself, and help your project. And that's where the salesmanship sort of comes into play. And a lot of folks don't think of themselves as salespeople, but if you start to wear that, kind of put that lens on and wear that hat as you're going and trying to get folks to build a coalition around your initiatives, you're going to be a lot more successful than somebody who doesn't.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. Now I understand that it's not sales in terms of you convincing everybody that your project is important. It's more a empathetic job, right? That you need to.
It does require a little bit of EQ, yeah.
Exactly. Using the other person's shoes if you must. So you mentioned that the operator, the engineer, the planner, each buying for different reasons. What will win each of them, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think, like the frontline folks, we have a labor shortage today. They can get another job. So if you say, hey, if you don't do this, we'll fire you, that's not the biggest threat, as big of a threat as it used to be. Obviously it's not convenient, but at the end of the day, they can, they want to get, they want to get there, do their job safely, go home safe, and move on. And so you've got to figure out, how can we help them, what's going to get them excited about their job? Are we going to help make them safer? Are we going to help them do less busy work or administrative work? Are we going to, help reduce, quality errors or other things that are disruptive to them that don't bring them joy? A lot of times it's as simple as, the communication in these across the front line is incredibly fragmented. They don't have a centralized source of truth there, and so they're getting asked the same thing over and over again because they don't, and that doesn't bring them joy, right? They don't like having to repeat themselves or explain themselves over and over to different stakeholders, and so if we can find ways that help them reduce the things that make them unhappy,
Mm-hmm.
less, and it doesn't have to be like really angry. It's just what are the things that they don't like to do?
Yeah.
What are the things they do like to do? How can we help them do more of the things they like to do and less of the things they don't like to do? As simple as that. And if you don't know what those answers are, the easiest way to figure that out is to go ask them.
Yeah.
A lot of leaders are afraid to go and get their shoes dirty or go actually ask their front line, but the frontline folks can tell you where the problems are, can tell you what frustrates them, and then that'll give you the information that you need to help provide context as it relates to whatever you're working on. So if you're working on a vision AI tool to help track quality on a high volume production line, you can help them understand that they're going to have less quality defects. They're not going to have to remove all of the waste from the shipping area. They're going to have less work they don't like to do as a result of those systems working if they participate and are involved in it. So just kind of thinking about how it makes their life easier.
Yeah, and you mentioned the emotional aspect, and I believe fear has a lot to do on how these people may be reticent to actually buy into a project like this. A lot of folks are afraid to lose their jobs, for example. And if you show them that this project, this transformation will make their lives easier and not worse, they won't lose their job because of it. That's a huge, huge negotiation argument, right?
And they may even get promoted because now it's going to make them look even better, and they'll have opportunities to go to further their careers.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And why do you say also that the most convincing demo is on the floor and not in the boardroom? What is the difference of showing a project like this on the floor instead of showing everyone the results, the potential results in a boardroom?
Yeah, for sure. Well, a lot of the industrial operations and manufacturing world have been burned many times. They've been promised the world. They've been shown that these tools are going to make them all this extra money or help get them all this extra value. And they'd show them these PowerPoints, they'd show them these dashboards. They say, here's how it's going to work, and they didn't involve. And so the executives were like, of course, that's a great idea. Let's do it. If I spend this much money and I get this much as value, that's an math equation that any executive says yes to every time. The problem is a lot of those tools aren't designed to interact and help support the frontline folks who are actually going to have to be involved in those workflows that these tools require. So what happens is they get these tools and they don't get the value they're expecting for one reason or another. Maybe the user experience for the frontline team requires an immense amount of training. It's very cumbersome, difficult to use, and so they don't end up getting any adoption. And so you have adoption failure and adoption risk. Alternatively, you may be working with a system that requires you to have a really strong data foundation, and maybe you don't have that today, and you're not bringing the right stakeholders in that can help bring that information into the room and say, hey, this tool would be great if we had the data or we had that foundation, but we don't. So it's so a lot of times when I to get through this hesitancy and this resistance, it's why don't you just go ahead and put it in the hands of the frontline folks? You need to work with vendors and tools that will allow you to go straight to those end users and prove adoption without requiring months or years worth of setup and incurring in a lot of time and resources and costs to even get to the stage that you're going to do something like a pilot. And so testing it out with kind of de-risks the entire scope of the project, because that's where most of these digital transformation projects are failing.
Yeah.
When they get into the hands.
And speaking on this human aspect, I'd like to bring in and talk about the human data advantage and pairing machine data with human context. What does that look like on the shop floor to you?
Yeah, well, most of, a lot of, you can go from manufacturer to manufacturer, and a lot of them will have the same equipment, some of the same types of assets, but they make something very different, and their environments are very different. So if you're making something out of a really tough steel type of material versus something that's maybe a softer, or you're making something out of a wood or an aluminum material, even the the amount of wear and tear on the machine and the equipment and the rest of the processes is going to be different. Not
Mhm.
to mention that you have different environmental circumstances. You may have different humidity and temperature levels, and different skill sets of operators. And so the machine, the OEMs, they can't predict every single scenario and use case of their machines and be able to tell you exactly how they're going to operate in every one of those specific scenarios. There's just an infinite number of scenarios that they'd have to control for.
Yeah.
And it's not how they test. So what ends up happening is those manuals and the machine data can be a good sort of primary source of information to help, but it needs to be augmented with the human data, the folks that have the know-how of how does this process work? How have we been doing it? How do we, what are some of the kinks? Even brand new equipment you can buy side by side, put them line by line, and they'll perform differently because some of the tolerances and things like that can be unusual, and that's where the human expertise is really critical to be able to kind of layer into how do we not only run this equipment, but how do we keep it running? How do we maintain it? How do we manage the reliability of this equipment? And so that data right now is, I think, some of the most important data on the shop floor that's not being captured, because most of that
Mhm.
is stored in, most of that
Yeah.
institutional knowledge is stored in these folks' heads.
Yeah.
It's seldom written down. And if it is, a lot of people are having it written down on paper, which doesn't get digitized, which can't be brought into a scalable ecosystem. And so, and then tools that they do have for, that are digital aren't really designed for them, and they're cumbersome. And so there's so much friction that it creates this resistance where they don't actually put that much useful information in there, if any at all.
Yeah, that
And so you have
sounds
it
that sounds
there. Yeah.
exactly right. So,
Yeah.
what do you do in that case? How do you actually capture the why and the how technicians know and machines don't?
Right. So you got to do it while they're at the point of work. So when they're doing the work, make it easy, because if you try to, it's like if you try to go and interview them at the end of the week and ask them everything they did,
Mm,
they probably will tell you 20% if they can
true.
remember it. And even if they do, they won't tell you all the details. It's like if I ask you what you had to eat last week,
Yeah.
maybe you could tell me, but you can't tell me all of the detail you could if you were actually having the meal right now. Right. And so how do we capture that information accurately and timely as we you have to make sure they have a tool that works with them at their point of work, where they're doing the work. And the other danger is that these folks are getting ready to retire. Like 50% of maintenance
Exactly.
reliability professionals will be at retirement age within the next few years. So
Yeah,
we have
I
to
heard
capture.
this data point where apparently at every 8 seconds, someone retires in manufacturing in the US. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's something. Yeah, it's less more than a couple of minutes for sure.
My
And
goodness.
there's not enough people coming into the industry to backfill them.
Yeah.
So, folks are worried, will AI or robotics take over jobs? They don't have enough people to do the jobs, for starters. And there's a ton of knowledge leaving
Yeah.
this workforce as these people go. So it's really important to capture that information, that human data today, because it's not just, they're not all going to leave, on a specific date in 2030. They're leaving every day.
The
And
way you put it, it sounds really urgent. Do you think this urgency is coming across? Are leaders in manufacturing understanding that and acting on that right now?
there's certainly a bit of a wake up call
Okay.
around some of the leadership teams. I know that there's one company that everyone would know, prior to COVID, the average frontline worker in their facility, in their manufacturing. This is a big enterprise company, tens of thousands of employees. They had over, I think, 18 to 19 years of was the average tenure on the front line.
Wow.
Post COVID today, it's 3.5 years is the average tenure of their frontline worker. There's and in case it's not obvious, there's a significant impact on their operations. They're having, they're struggling across the board because they have, a lot of well-intentioned folks that are trying to do their best, but they just don't know what to do. And all of that knowledge is gone. And so they're really struggling to not only just, let alone like not even put newer technologies and newer innovation and modernization away. They can't even keep things running the way it was
Wow.
because of that knowledge loss. So there's it's the struggle is very real today. It's very painful for organizations, and um, But the urgency, I think, is not to the level that it should be. I think there
Mm.
should be a lot more focus on this than maybe there is.
Well, and how does building a unified operational reality turn skepticism into confidence in this aspect? How do you, in that scenario where you already have so many challenges, you bring in new solutions, you bring in new technology, and you actually conquer the buy-in from the front line?
For sure. Well, I think a lot of these foundations are, if the foundation's not strong and you don't have a good process and a good foundation, then you're going to have bad outcomes. You're not going to get what you're expecting because bad data is really just like a people process issue in disguise. And so it's really fundamentally important that they have to kind of figure out what is it we're trying to accomplish? What are we trying to capture? How are we trying to structure it? And make sure that you have a playbook that can be scalable and repeatable. And so that's sort of where, it's like, how do we get started? Where do we go if we don't have that today? It's really, if you do have that sense of urgency, sometimes it's tempting to say, let's try to do something everywhere
Exactly.
all at
Yeah,
once,
it's
right?
understandable. Yeah. Yeah.
And you have to start small, and you have to build out that foundation from your areas of your highest levels of confidence and competency. So go to your process lines, go to your just single line in the plant that you have the most confidence in, and kind of build the foundation around that, and slowly scale outwards, rather than try to tackle it all at once. Because if you try to do everything at once, you won't be able to have enough kind of foundational principles ready to scale it and set it up to win.
Yeah, Nick, listening to you, and I hope folks listening to us right now will agree that it becomes more and more. It becomes clear that the playbook that you brought to FabTech, the crawl,
Yeah,
walk, run playbook, is much more than a mantra. It's
that's
actually
right.
something that we should implement in manufacturers today.
100%, because you've got to start by getting adoption and building that habit. And if you don't build the habits and the adoption, then that's where you're going to not have the stickiness that you need for this to be, ultimately successful. And so it does start with like crawling, where you're just mapping your workout, who, what, when, where, the basics, the 5 whys, digitize,
Mm.
a few preventive maintenance types of routines, some corrective jobs with, don't go overkill and try to think we're going to start doing predictive maintenance on this line or something really, really advanced when you don't have any kind of foundation. And then once you do have that initial crawl sort of scenario stood up, and you're tracking one metric, one number for 30 days, then you can start to get things a little bit more sophisticated. You can start to introduce taxonomies like fault causes, faults and cause codes and things like that. You can start to incorporate more sophisticated procedures around it that involve whether it's photos or other measurements and things like that,
Yeah.
and just kind of slowly get people built as they get their feet wet, as they get more accustomed to the system. Then you can kind of layer in more complexity, because if you try to start too complex, you're going to overwhelm them, and it's going to be too daunting to start. And after you get to that, like through that walk phase, you go to the run phase, then you can start to build in things that are like conditional based triggers that are taking in data from other systems, and
Mm.
allow you to start to incorporate some lightweight AI to help kind of take your operation to the next level. But if you don't do it in that right order, and you don't kind of measure those steps out with clear um, start stop points to those stages, it makes it really difficult to get to that run stage.
It makes a lot of sense, and we go back to previous episodes where we talked on AI and how it has been difficult to have these leaders buy into AI new technology, or maybe they do buy in, but they have such a hassle implementing because they don't have the structure that they need to start. So I want to go back to the crawl part of your playbook. And you mentioned that you start small, you digitize work orders, you create visibility, fix friction before analytics, and then you install that one metric. And I would love to know if you have an example to share with us. on
Yeah,
these
absolutely. I
first
mean, we have
stages?
customers. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of customers who do have, you know, roughly 60% of the ecosystem today is still using pen and paper and Excel spreadsheets. Not even a legacy tool that would be competitive to us, and or something they put in. Um, so when you're coming out of we have a lot of customers who are coming from that world today, and so when you ask them, how are we going to build out your asset hierarchy? They don't even have an asset hierarchy. They maybe don't even know what their equipment is. So part of that early step is going through and saying, well, we have 1,000+ pieces of important equipment. How, uh, yeah. And so where do we start? And where what I've seen work really successfully with one of our several of our customers is you start by figuring out what are our most critical assets. How do we, and let's label those as our critical. And what is a critical asset? It's if this breaks, our entire money making machine stops. Our process that we make money breaks, and we stop making money. So go label each, and not the nice to have. Like if it gets too hot and the air conditioning breaks down, but it doesn't affect the product, and maybe people aren't happy, maybe that's not a critical asset,
Yeah.
right? We'll still crack that, and we're going to get to it, so we make sure everybody stays comfortable. But today we want to focus on just the stuff that makes your money printer keep printing money. And once you identify and label those, then you start to build out some high level understanding of where what are the likely causes of how do those likely break down? How have they broken down in the past? And those are something that some of our customers have to just go ask their technicians and the line managers. What happens, when this breaks? What's usually the problem? And we can start to work backwards to build out preventive maintenance schedules to try to address some of those issues and make sure that we can kind of build that out. And so we've had several. We were working with a company that it's a food processing company that surprisingly was pretty basic at this level, and we were able to get them from full 100% reactive to more than 60% preventive within about 6 months as far as their work order balance. And it was really just a matter of going through and labeling your problem assets and trying to stay ahead of those issues.
Is there a situation or a specific that you can share with folks here who are maybe wondering, well, am I reactive? Am I the majority of the time reactive? How can they know if they are?
Well, it feels like everything's on fire and you're playing whack-a-mole because it's a question of when your technicians show up to work every day, do they know what they're going to do, or do they just have to tackle whatever is coming up? And for the majority of companies today, even big Fortune 100 companies, it's the latter. They're coming in and it's, let's see what's happening. Let's go fix this. And it's a really difficult pattern to break out of because they say, well, my guys are so busy, we don't even have time to do preventive stuff.
Yeah.
Because their entire day is filled with stuff that if we don't fix it, we stop making money. So we have to do these fixes. And so shifting away from that is a really, really challenging exercise because a lot of these plants are trying to run 24/7. So they don't have, it's not like we can say, okay, on the weekend, we'll start doing some of this. They're running 24/7. And so they can't, 3 or 4 shifts. It makes it really difficult. And so it's, that kind of is a difficult mindset and culture to escape from because it doesn't feel like it has any let up. And the reality is there's a few ways to kind of look at it. I've seen some companies that have one of the technicians on a shift that guy becomes dedicated to doing preventive and the others focus on the reactive.
Okay.
And so one person's time starts doing some of the preventive work. Others will say, hey, anytime you do reactive on a piece of equipment, you should also do a preventive while you're there. So if I'm going to go to this machine and fix it for this
I've
thing, I
seen
should
that
also
happen
go
with software, and it really works sometimes. Yeah.
That's right.
It's interesting.
There's different ways, but you have to be really intentional about understanding what the purpose of that is. Because if you can kind of, again, for a technician, now you're saying you're going to have to do more work because you're already doing reactive. So it goes back to that salesmanship.
Yeah.
The hope is that you can convince them that if they do these preventive steps, they will have less, high intensity, urgency, reactive stuff in the future.
Less headache to go. And
Right.
yeah, definitely. And so it needs a mindset shift indeed, because it's not so you went through this reactive process and now you document it. No, you have to document what you wish would be in place so
Yeah.
that situation wouldn't come up.
Right.
So it's a
And we've
different question.
had other customers where it's like they didn't have the expertise in house to determine what the preventive measure should be. So for the first 3 to 6 months, what they did was they just measured and documented everything that happened that was bad. So they didn't do any preventive. And then that gave them the data that they could now look back and say, oh, wow, this actually
That's a
happened
start.
6 times.
Yeah,
And
that's a
that gave
start.
them a place to start.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Definitely. And for folks who are a little bit further than that, so they're not doing everything reactive anymore, they are ready to
right.
walk or maybe start jogging, start running. What do
Yeah,
you
yeah.
say? Like you call AI readiness a daily discipline. So,
That's
what
right.
does that discipline look like in real life? What is so? On the other aspect, we asked you on how can I know if I'm reactive? And now, how can I know if I have this daily discipline with my AI processes?
There's a few ways. I mean, I don't know a single company that says they have too many resources and they have too many people that work on their team and the reliability departments.
Yeah.
They're always feeling like they're kind of always working from a place of scarcity. So one thing that can happen is you can do things like over PMing equipment, right? And so you're doing more preventive maintenance than you need. So imagine if you have two cars and you only drive one a day. Maybe you have your daily one you take to work, and then you have a fun weekend car. And for the sake of the simplicity, we'll say they're like the same type of car, both a Toyota Camry. Now, if I were to change the oil on those once a year or once every 6 months at the same time, it wouldn't make sense because I'm running one machine a lot harder. One
Mm,
car I'm driving every day, the
makes
other one
sense.
is only on the weekend. The maintenance will be different, should be different because the wear and tear on those machines or on those vehicles are different. Same thing exists in a manufacturing environment. A lot of companies that are doing a lot of PMs already are maybe doing too much preventive maintenance on machines that aren't running as hard or working as much, and they're doing not enough on the machines that are. So part of that, now that you have that foundation, you can start to do some critical thinking and continuous
Mm,
improvement analysis to say, let's figure out if we're using the limited resources we have. I can only have John spend 8, 10 hours a day doing something, turning a wrench. Let's make sure that those are the best 10 hours, 8 hours of his time as possible,
mhm.
instead of having him do things that are maybe not as value add to the business. So that's part of the readiness, is just being able to start to do some simple lightweight
Yeah.
analysis. The other part is making sure that whatever that technician John is doing every day is he's documenting it, and that can be done through voice. We support voice notes so that if he's a talker, he can sit there and talk into it. He doesn't have to type it out. And making sure that we're documenting exactly what's being done when he's going through and completing that work,
Mhm.
so that the next group of that the engine and that flywheel can get smarter and have more information around what's being done to maintain that equipment. And then I'd say like the next step to get to that run is bringing in machine data, whether it's you have PLCs and HMIs. A lot of these machines have a lot of information, whether it's runtime or cycle count. Some of them have thousands of other different metrics that you can pull out of it, as well as maybe something you might want to augment usually older equipment with, like vibration monitoring tools on the motors and
Mhm.
other sensors to sort of start to build out a more robust, asset health photo, uh, a better, perspective of the asset health overall. So you can start to, in aggregate, take in all of this data and metrics that can inform your team to understand, are those PMs that we're doing helping? Should there be, are there opportunities for us to get ahead of potential failures because we can identify anomalies with, vibration, or maybe we start to learn that if we, instead of doing this preventive maintenance every 3 weeks, we should actually do it every 1,000 runtime hours. And now we can actually capture that accurate runtime hours, and
Mhm.
that may be 1 week, a couple weeks in certain scenarios. It might be multiple weeks in other scenarios, and start to get more precise with your and with your reliability plans, which can allow you to become your equipment, your reliability to become more predictable,
Mhm.
which allows your operations to make better decisions and understand how they can serve their customers on time. It's sort of
Yeah.
all sorts of synergize and works well together when you're thinking about it holistically from a reliability perspective.
Yeah, that sounds actually dreamy. All of the time that you are wasting, um, putting a fire, and now you can actually use to improve either how you serve your customers, the productivity of your either the machines or even your team, as well as think on ways to improve. I think that's
That's right.
really you painted this board for us, and I can definitely, as you were describing, I was actually seeing a very different scenario from the first one that we discussed. It
That's right.
sounds like a different floor completely.
Yeah, everybody wants to do AI, but AI is really just math on your habits.
Mm.
So you have to if you fix your habits and you fix your culture, then the math will get smart in your AI. You'll be able to leverage tools like AI. But if you don't have the good foundation and kind of understanding holistically what you're trying to do, it's not going to be really effective and helpful for folks.
Yeah. And for the folks who are still maybe thinking about it, but they're not moving towards this scenario, I would like to talk
Yeah,
on the cost of caution. So,
yeah.
you say that endless evaluation process can be disguised as prudence. So, what do you mean by that? How do companies fall and leaders fall into this trap that they evaluate, but they are actually not transforming. They are not innovating. They are just thinking on it.
One thing I found really interesting is that most of the operational leaders that I come across today, again, they're some of the smartest people I've ever met. They've cut their teeth. They got their experience, kind of working their way up through the ranks. They started on a line. They've worked in, they've managed teams on a plant floor. They've grown to oversee more and more responsibility. They did this in the world of yesterday. They
Mm,
did this in the old school way of doing things, right? And generally not a very technology focused. They haven't spent a ton of time digging into all of the shiny new technology and innovation that's happening. And to be fair, it's coming really fast. Like the advancement in AI and other technologies has accelerated pretty dramatically over the last 5 to 10 years. And so for them, when they're spending all of their time thinking about their operation, or almost all of it. And then the rest of their time that they have left of their family, of their personal lives, they've kind of fallen behind in understanding all of the nuance that is, can be a bit very intimidating to
yeah.
understand how all of the technology in a modern manufacturing plant could be working and how it, what that looks like. And so what happens is they see if you can look at like just the rate of change of like ChatGPT. They've got a new model, a new something coming out every month or two, right? All these big AI companies do, and so a lot of them are really afraid that if they choose something today, it's going to be outdated in a month, and 3 months from now it's going to be archaic, and they're going to be stuck with some process or system or tool that is going to be so far behind that they're afraid that they're not going to make the right choice, and they don't feel
Yeah.
like they have all the information they need to make the right choice. Um, on the other side of that coin, a lot of them are so close to retirement.
Mm,
They're a few years away that they say, you know what, if I ride this out, I don't make a bad decision. Nobody gives me in trouble. I'm going to get my pension. I'm going to be out the door. Let's just, we've been doing this for 40 years, 50 years without AI and all of this stuff. What's another two or three?
mm,
I'll let this be the next generation's problem. And so they get kind of in this. There's a few different reasons for it. So they're just really they've kind of paralyzed themselves
mm,
in these, and a lot of them make decisions by committee, and these committees are really good. They're very risk averse
mm,
by their nature. So it becomes really difficult to get consensus around something that does require a bit of bold, educated action.
yeah.
And the issue is that I see a lot, so they don't make any decision, and then they're falling further and further behind. Their problems are continuing to compound, and their competitors are able to gain momentum and catch up to them. And I think we're going to see in the next 10, 15 years of Fortune 500 completely rotate, and we're going to see big companies that had legacy businesses go the way of Kodak,
Mm,
where it's hard to imagine a world where they weren't going to always be the leader. And I think we're going to see that across the board with companies that kind of don't allow themselves to get past this purgatory of indecision, and they have to kind of they've got to take some risks. They've got to be smart to choose solutions that are very interoperable and
yeah.
will allow the ones that have momentum that are innovating
Yeah,
to
I think
to
that risk of becoming the dinosaur, no one wants that, and
yeah,
it seems like a risk for the future, though. So I would like
right.
to bring this closer to us. And what is the
Yeah,
cost of waiting a quarter, for example? So I'm not
yeah.
deciding on this right now in 2025 still, or at the beginning of 2026. I will leave it to the second quarter or the second half of the year. What is the cost in lost data, lost experience, or lost competitive ground? Because you cannot,
Yeah.
as you said, you crawl and then you walk and then you run. So the change won't happen over a course of a month or two. You have to
Yeah.
start to see the results within a few months.
That's right. But the change does compound pretty quickly internally
Mm,
once you do start to make that cultural shift. And so you get to some of the really exciting ROI benefits a lot faster with these technologies than you would have historically, where you would have needed, maybe you did find a new, set of equipment or a process that you could dramatically change the throughput on your operation, but would require millions of dollars of investment and downtime to replace the lines or what have you, or switch them over. With the urgent risk today is that look at how many people you have that are planned to retire in the next quarter. Look at your average retention rate in general. Like how much turnover do you have? What's your turnover rate in general in a quarter? That's how many heads. That's how many people worth of institutional knowledge are leaving your facility and your operation in the next quarter.
wow.
And the value of that data is really hard to overstate. I get asked a lot, like, Nick, how much data do we need for the AI to work? And nobody can really tell you that. Anyone who says they can is probably, a little overconfident, because but one way to kind of help mentally frame it on how much operational data you need is how many days can you go in a row in your operation without something different happening?
Mm,
And and that can be, in many cases, there are multiple years that go by before an anomaly of some sort will hit, right? And it's not to say that you need this full 3, 5 year, 10-year windows of time and data to have functional AI, but it's just to say that as you every day that you start to build that and add to that library of data and that kind of baseline, the foundation, is going to make your AI stronger, um, more effectively. It's like the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today,
okay.
because you've got to start that journey sooner than later. And you don't really know the state your competitors are in. You don't really know where they are either. So, you may have some sort of market advantage today that your competitors are, quietly working,
Mhm.
maybe even not as intentionally as they may think, towards getting to a place where they'll be able to outmaneuver you in a few quarters or a few years based on the work they're doing today. So it's really important that organizations start to make those decisions. And the folks, if they don't know what to do, just make sure that they're supporting these initiatives and supporting the folks that do have the expertise to kind
Yeah.
of go through and have those ideas.
And I would like to ask you, to invite you to talk to the
Yeah,
leader listening to us right now,
right.
someone who has decided to plant that tree today. What
Yeah,
will they see within a year, let's say, in 12 months? How
yeah,
is their company, their plants, their lives change in a 12-month period if they actually move, if they take into action everything that you just laid out for us?
yeah. I think the reality. I mean, they're going to be a lot more efficient. They're going to save money. They're going to be a lot smarter, and they're going to be making more informed decisions. What those specifics look like are going to be dependent on your organization today, in the state of it today. And the number one thing I would ask a leader to do is go and shadow the frontline workers, and not tell them that you're the executive. Don't make the red carpet roll out where they all are afraid and think the leader's watching. Go in there undercover boss style and just watch them and ask them to teach you how they go about their day. You're gonna immediately find, whatever your top 5 priorities are that you think that your business needs to solve, and the challenges. That list is going to dramatically change after a day on the front line,
Yeah.
because you're going to start to realize there are so many lower hanging fruit opportunities that are creating. I go to companies uh, all the time, multiple times a month, where they're frontline skilled workers that have a tremendous amount of engineering talent skill are spending 60 to 80% of their time doing administrative stuff behind a computer rather than actually out on the floor working with the equipment, making the process better. And there's no doubt in anybody's mind once they see that's not good. That's a bad use of those people's times. It's unproductive. And figuring out how to moving that from 80% to 60% to 60% to 40%, removing things from their plate to get them back out and on the tools, on the equipment, is going to dramatically change their operation a lot faster than anything they can do behind from their office.
Wow, Nick, you've been so, so kind with us, sharing all of this information, all of your knowledge, your experience. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us. And I'm sure a lot of people here will want to follow you if they already don't follow you. But if they do want to follow your work and the range factor, how can they do that?
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn at Nick Haase. You can find me, follow me, MaintainX. You can go to our website, go to our LinkedIn and social channels, and keep up to date on what we've got going on. We've got a lot of exciting content. And Amelia, thank you all so much for your time today, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And for everyone here listening to us, I have an invitation. First, thank you for joining the Process Master podcast with Nick and I here today. And this week, I would like you to pick one process on your floor and run Nick's his playbook, the crawl, walk, run test. You can document it, you can digitize it, you can learn from it. Yeah. So every big transformation starts there. Thank you so much for joining. I'll see you again at the next Process Masters podcast.